Hey folks, Andrew here. Want to show you this. So this is the motor out of the lift. Emptied her out. Getting it out wasn't too bad because the way I put it in only had a few wires. There's a gas line, a couple of bolts and nuts. So here we are. This is kind of like what it feels like when I started on it. Empty bay, except for this is already ready for this motor. The hydraulic pump's ready for the motor. So in a tough spot, I pulled the crank, had to pull the piston rod to get, needed to pull the rod, and in order to do that, I had to end up taking the top end off as well. So this is the top end, this is where the head goes, you can see because the distributor's there. So in other words, the engine is upside down right now. Here's the front plate, be a timing chain from here to here, running the cam to the crank. Right here is where the crank would sit, and what you're looking at is the bottom of the pistons, other than this big hole where I've already pulled one out. That's my damaged one. So the bearings spun on it, and here they are. So these two bearings spun. If you notice on the edge, they're beat up and bent around and wore thin. All those scratches you see are from the wear. So that's the one. It was a rod bearing, so that means the bottom part of the piston bearing. So this is a good one. This is still good. This has the bearing right here. You can see it right here where it goes from the piston rod to that little thin piece of metal. That's the bearing, and that rides on the crankshaft, which is not here. It's in the back of my other car. So I took it in to see if they could shave it down. Shaving the crank's no problem, but what is a problem is it's wore down so much that you can't buy bearings that are thick enough. More common engines do have bearings that are thick enough, but this engine isn't common enough to seem to have thicker bearings. It does have thicker bearings, just not as thick as I need, because apparently I wore it way down too far. So where I'm at on it is buying a new crank is more expensive than the engine by twice as much as I originally bought it. Finding another engine is a possibility, but then I have the problems of trying to hook it back up to this hydraulic pump, because this engine is designed now after machining to connect to this hydraulic pump. Another engine will not be. So it'd be nice to find this engine, but they aren't very, Datsuns that they came out of aren't very common. Maybe I can find a forklift junkyard or something, maybe. But I haven't been able to find the crankshaft online except for like $1,400 or $500, which is more than almost twice what I paid for the engine to start with. So one of my thoughts is, okay, well, what about going DC and batteries, or what about going AC and hooking the lift to a cord? And some people's responses to me going AC and putting a heavy duty cord to the lift are, you don't want to be attached by a cord. But for my intents and purposes, for using this thing to work on the house, I'm close enough I can run a cord and drag it around. So that I don't feel like as big a deal. The tough part is, can I run heavy duty enough cord to deliver the amps I need? One of the big problems with that is I don't have three-phase here, so can I get three-phase power? And then with DC, the problem is the motors are expensive, so we're talking 800 versus the 500 for a new crank for this motor. So some things to think about. If you guys got some feedback for me, I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do next. I still want to get this lift working, but the question is, how am I going to power it? Can I find another motor cheap? Not so far. Can I find another crank cheap? Not so far. Can I go DC? It's kind of expensive, more expensive than the crank. Can I go AC? Yeah, it's cheaper. It's $250 for AC motors, but then I don't have the three-phase, so it's, can I get enough horsepower? I probably need at least 20 horsepower AC, and right now for single phase, I think the biggest I'm seeing is 10 or 15 horsepower. But the good thing is I can get those used for like 200, 250, run a cord to it. And the good part about going electric, either AC or DC, it's much easier to make an adapter because it's just a straight shaft to shaft connection that I can do to the hydraulic pump. Or if I get another engine, I have to have a mounting system for it to mount in there, and I also have to go from a bell housing, which would normally go to a transmission, to attach to that hydraulic pump, and whatever crankshaft with bolts and odd things would have to be mated is much more complicated because it's not just a shaft coming out that I can put a yoke or a spline on. So, all right, anyway, loads of problems and questions, less solutions. If you guys can help me make some decisions, please leave some comments. All right, guys.